Please put in the chat during the presentation if you have any specific questions as well, and Carl will get through those. And also put in the chat where you're from. We'd like to know where you're joining us from. So yeah, get typing into the chat.
Cheers, Astrid. Thank you very much. And that will be Thea in San Diego straight away saying hi. Good evening to you in San Diego. Thea, great to have you on board this evening for this webinar. Everything you need to know about money transfers to Portugal. Now, you would think it's a fairly innocuous and simple title, is it not? Everything you need to know about money transfers to Portugal. But there is a lot to it, as we'll discover this evening in the company of Sarah Davey from Spartan FX. Good to see you, Sarah. How are you this evening?
I'm very well. I'm back home in Lisbon, so I'm happy now.
Check you out. Home, she says. Home.
No,
That's fantastic.
I moved in May, and I sort of thought it'd be hard to kind of get that mindset changed. But now, the other day, I just said home.
Isn't that great?
That's it.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. It sounds like it's going very well for you, and we'll talk more after the we finished chatting and the recorded part of the webinar tonight. And as I said, everything you need to know about money transfers to Portugal. You think that conversation could be done and dusted within a few minutes, but there is so much more to it than people realize, and there are things that people don't know they don't know, I guess, and that's what we'll elaborate on this evening. And it's great to have you here to talk about things which might include this evening. And if you have particular questions, do pop them into the chat. If we don't answer them on the recording, we'll definitely get to them in the lock-in afterwards. What to consider when moving large amounts to Portugal, and that's going to be a big step for people when they're buying a property, for example. Exchange rate movements and your options, and that it is. I don't know if the word is volatile, if that's over exaggerating at the moment, but it is it's an interesting picture at the moment. What to consider when moving regular amounts to Portugal. So as well as the big amount that you might move for a house, for example, you may be having a pension transferred on a regular basis. So we'll look at that as well. What happens if you do not have a bank account in Portugal? If you haven't managed to figure that out yet, what to do in that eventuality? What are the risks? Money being held, missing deadlines. This is a key message, really, isn't it? Is not to leave it too late. You don't want to miss deadlines because that can cause a lot of problems. And there are devices and facilities that Spartan FX have to make sure everything goes well. We'll deal with a few acronyms tonight, including the famous IBAN number that's new to people when they start moving money into Portugal and transferring money. The things that can go wrong. We'll look at the pitfalls and the problems, and we'll do, you'll tell us what we can do about those, of course, Sarah, tonight. Payments needing more authorization. That can come up. That can be a problem. And of course, you have a solution for that. How best to plan for large purchases, notably the home, and then after that, the car. But there may be others as well, other big large amounts that you want to move back and forth. How safe is the money during transfer after you've pushed the button? It's a tense moment, isn't it, when you're like, okay, I'm gonna push transfer now, and knowing what happens after you've pressed that button. Sarah will explain how fast are the transfers and are the amounts limited. So a key message that we've talked about before, of course, is not to leave it too late, and you'll talk about this evening. But another message that's come up, another important thing to share with people, is that people don't even realize they need this service, right? Because when they've thought about moving money around the world, they've done that through their bank, or they've just changed money as a tourist. This can be big news to people. So should we start there this evening, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how I sort of explain it to people is similar to how you'd use your financial advisor. I mean, sort of over the years, going along to events, things like this, or seminars, when people are talking a lot about money, they normally focus on the tax side of things, which obviously is very important, especially if you're an American. You've got your financial advisor giving you guidance and advice on where I should put my money, when I should move it, and that sort of works hand in hand, obviously, with the tax side of things. But then it's not really thought about actually how I'm going to move the money, when I'm going to move the money, and how much is that going to cost me? Because you're looking at how can I save money and not pay as much tax? How can I make more money by using my financial advisor? But the exchange rate movements, as we'll get into, can have a real impact. All of a sudden, it's those euros are going to cost you, I don't know, a few thousand, maybe 8,000. I mean, last year we saw a rate movement, and the difference on 250,000 euros was $32,000. So that can happen. So any gains or profit or savings you're looking at making through other means, as I said, tax or whatever, are suddenly wiped out by the exchange rate movement. So it's something that you really need to sort of think hand in hand with all the other aspects that you're doing with your move.
Okay, excellent, brilliant. Okay, so let's get into that nitty gritty, and of course, it will be information rich, and people can obviously watch the video again to pick up on things. But I think you'll be breaking it down and simplifying it into a 3-step process a little bit later on. But first and foremost, the big one, of course, is if you're you want to transfer money for a property or a deposit, for example, if you're renting. Let's start there. I mean, so, you know, some people here, some people watching this later on YouTube won't have done that. What do they need to know when it comes to transferring the big amounts of money?
Yeah, as I said, obviously, larger amounts of money, any exchange rate movement is obviously going to have a bit more of an impact than if you're transferring maybe small amounts, maybe regular amounts of a few thousand here or there. You know, if you're buying a property, because some people may rent. I mean, a lot of clients rent for 12 months. Obviously, you do need an address for your visa. Some people choose to rent and then choose to buy after that once they've decided where they want to live. Some people are looking at actually buying straight away. Maybe they can afford to do it. Maybe they know where they want to be. Also, you've got to look at what are the costs of renting and the monthly payments. Maybe it's more cost effective to buy. Again, obviously that's your decision, and you know you talk with specialists on that front. But if you are looking to buy a property, it's not the same as if you're buying it in America or UK or your home country. You're given a price, and that's how much it's going to cost you. Yes, you might have extra fees of a survey, lawyers, all this sort of stuff, but generally the price of the property doesn't change. Here, you've been priced in euros, and say, for example, now you come on a scouting trip, you have a look around the property, you're using the rate today, calculating how much that's going to cost you. You think, okay, right, that's affordable, that's in our budget. Then you go to maybe pay a deposit. That might be, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, maybe quite quickly, depending on that process. That rate could have changed slightly. So again, that deposit costs you a little bit more money. Or then even so, the completion of the property can be anywhere between 6, 8, 12 weeks time. The rate again could change. So whatever you're working on now, when you're looking at that property, what you'll end up paying upon completion could be completely different. It could be the same. The rate could be better and you've saved money, but it's a little bit unknown. So the benefit really of looking at the exchange rates now gives you more options. Yeah. It might help you budget because you can fix the rate for that future payment. You can buy euros in advance. So again, it's just if you give yourself more time, then you potentially got more options. Because if, for example, you're told to make a payment this week, you have to take the rate that it's at this week. You've got no choice. Whether it's improved or whether it's got worse, it doesn't make any difference. You've got a deadline this week, you've got to pay it, you've got absolutely no choice. Whereas if you give yourself a little bit more time, there are more options, and sometimes that's where clients perhaps have saved a little bit more money or they've controlled their budget. As that we've got clients that are sending money out this year, last month, this month, and they've already bought their euros last year. Now, depending on when they've sent it out, some have it's been exactly the same, and therefore, you know, there's no difference. Others have saved a few £1,000s. Again, that can make such a difference. Some of it's peace of mind. It depends on your situation, what's your budget, and what you're willing to have the rate, basically.
So there's a little more to it than when you're doing the deal, leaving it to the last minute and then just pushing the button to transfer the money. There's a whole lot more value and support you can get by starting the process much earlier on than leaving it to the last minute, which you could forgive people for thinking, right? I'm going to buy a house. I'll transfer the money when the time comes, and I'll be prompted to do so. From our conversations with you previously, you could find yourself in some difficulty for all sorts of reasons doing it that way. So you would recommend getting in touch with the Spartan FX team, opening an account, and getting in a conversation with somebody, because that's another thing people might presume. Just like an online banking system, you would log on, you'd never speak to anyone, you just press some buttons to change the money. But it's a very different proposition with Spartan, isn't it? You can become currency literate, if you like, or exchange literate, can't you, by starting a relationship with
Absolutely. It's free to have those conversations, but at least if you're starting to have the conversations, you're starting to think about it, you're giving yourselves a little bit more options. Again, like you'd speak to your financial advisor, you speak to them probably months in advance of you actually doing something with them, because you're looking at your whole situation, what money you've got available, what your time frames, what you're looking to do, and you kind of really need that kind of approach. Now, it may be that you wait and do it when you need it. That's not a problem. You can still go ahead and do that, but at least you know that you've given yourself more options or an opportunity to maybe take advantage of the rate.
Very good. Okay, so some people might be thinking in this instance, well, I haven't even got a Portuguese bank account yet, so there's no point. That might also not be true. That assumption we could also challenge.
Absolutely, because that's the other thing about, you know, people not realizing this service exists, that a lot of people do use their bank, but in order to use your bank, you need to have a beneficiary. So you either need to be paying to a lawyer, or you need to, or a third party, or you need a Portuguese bank account. But that's not the case, because we can actually buy euros and hold them for you free of charge. And it is allowing people to, as I said, either take advantage of the rate, get their euros. Some people are doing not all of the amount of money they need. You might do a quarter or a half. And again, that spreads their risk. You know, I had a client that I spoke to last year, and when the rates were spiking throughout the year, she just bought sort of a quarter of what she needed. And then as I said, the average overall, she was buying it at good levels, basically. And then also we've had clients who have still, and then from then you can pay any third party. But also we've got clients who have got a Portuguese bank account, but they're still living in America, and they're not very good with the online banking with their Portuguese bank account. So they're still using us because we can then pay those bills to third parties until she moves across to Portugal.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. So can you talk to us about some of the pitfalls and problems and challenges people face on a practical level day to day, and how you take care of those things?
Absolutely. So we've touched a little bit on exchange rate, but a lot of what we do is really around process, and that's where we see probably more problems or issues, or people getting more stressed about moving money. So the examples that we've seen are generally around either the bank holding the money, banks having limits on how much you can transfer, maybe an issue that you're here in Portugal, either on a scouting trip or you've moved, and then you're trying to move money and there's difficulties there, or on other online providers are holding money. Again, it's all around sort of delays of those payments, and you've got a payment to make. So we had a client who was referred to us more recently. They had they came to the beginning of the week and they need to make a payment by the end of the week. And the stress was they were using Chase, and they didn't realize until then that the bank had a limit on how much they can do each day, and they were trying to buy a property at the end of the week. And basically it was very stressful. The estate agent, the client, everyone was very stressed, because literally they wouldn't have been able to meet that payment deadline because of the restrictions that their bank had. We've seen that a number of times. One client, their bank had a limit; they could only move $70,000 every 30 days. So a lot of online banking, us in the UK, we have a limit it's normally about 10,000 every day. So again, if you're sending smaller amounts, that's fine. But if you're coming to make larger payments and you've got a deadline to make, that's where you may encounter some issues. What are my solutions? How do I get around that? Some banks can take a week to transfer the money. It's the way that they send the money. There's a client who was trying to buy a car. They used their bank. The money didn't arrive on time. They couldn't buy the car, so they had to rent a car until they could sort out a solution. Again, it's all around sort of these sort of deadlines that people have to make. And again, it goes back to leaving it to the last minute. That's where, again, if anything, it's getting you to think about these sort of things sooner rather than later, because as much as, you know, through our system, we move money very quickly. We managed to help the client that was with Chase, and we got her money there on time. So we can help, but you just don't want that kind of clients coming to us that stressed that they're having problems. Let's have a conversation, you know, earlier. Let's look at who you're banking with. We may know the restrictions that are involved. Clients can then do something about that before you go. Usually on the larger sums, there's more authorization, which is justified. I mean, we had a client in the UK who was trying to move, it's obviously a lot of money, over $1 million, went into their bank. They couldn't get it authorized because the bank manager wasn't there.
Yikes. Okay.
Payments over $1 million.
Right.
It may be that, you know, even on sort of house purchases, you might have to sign some documentation. We've seen clients give people, obviously as long as you trust them, family and friends, power of attorney. You know, there's other things and ways around certain types of accounts, some are better than others. So for example, we know that Wells Fargo are not the greatest with payments, certainly internationally, but Charles Schwab is better. So again, having those conversations and looking at who you're banking with earlier, again, could help with the process.
Very good. Yeah, because people could assume, couldn't they, that you know, they're doing it for the first time themselves, but for you it's not, and all sorts of assumptions would spring from that, which can be checked against your experience of dealing with lots of people and lots of banks and seeing where these possible hold-ups can happen. The biggest assumption, I guess, that needs to be checked is it's my money and I'll do what I want with it. I'll just ask for it, and the bank will fall into line and move it around as I request. That's not always the case, is it?
Oh no, absolutely not. Obviously, you know, anti-money laundering and all the checks were there, but they have increased since COVID, really. So there are more and more checks and more sort of questions asked from the bank, which is good because they are trying to protect you and to try to protect them, but obviously can make it more challenging. And it's even little things like, even if you didn't use us, for example, Charles Schwab, you need to fill out a form to make that international payment. And a lot of the clients, we help them fill out that form.
Yes.
You know, you go into branch, and we've talked about the IBAN. Some branches you go into in America and the cashier has never seen an IBAN before. They don't know how to make the payment. The clients put us on video call with the bank teller. We've spoken to bank tellers and told them how to make the payment.
Yeah.
And it's things like that we can help with, that they're asking more security questions and you need a bit of help with the answers, things like that we can help with.
Great. We'll come back to banks in just a minute, because people, again, another assumption, I'll just get my bank to change the money. That'll be fine. I'm sure you'll have something to say about that, but just dwelling on the IBAN number for a moment. This is this is going to be new to people if they're not used to European banking. This is the very long number, which in some ways is great because it's you know, it has so many numbers. There's a kind of implied security there, but there are more things to go wrong possibly with entering digits and the human factor in there. Tell us more about the IBAN and what you do to make sure everything goes well with that.
Absolutely, and that's something that you know, you rightly said, it's a long number. And I know myself, when I put in anything like that, you're checking over it numerous times to make sure you put it in correctly. But the factor is that you may put it in correctly, but what happens if it isn't the right bank account? As long as it's a valid bank account, if you put it on any online system or give it to your bank, it will go, because it's a valid number. But what we're seeing now and then is, unfortunately, there is more fraud about. And say, for example, your lawyer sends you an email with the IBAN details on, that email could have been intercepted and a digit could be changed.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
Then basically you're sending it to someone else's account, or just human error in the law office. And again, I'm using law office as an example. They're not a problem. They're perfectly fine. But anybody that's sending you bank account details, their email or your email could have been hacked or intercepted.
Yes.
Someone puts it in, whether it be any department, any person, if they're putting it in manually, again, there could be human error. So what we do, and what I recommend to everybody, is that if you're receiving details via email, it's always ring them and just double check it over the telephone.
Right. Very good.
All the time, just to make sure that doesn't happen, because unfortunately we have seen instances where clients have paid, and unfortunately, because the way we just touched on, the banks are cracking down, asking more security questions. Are you sure you really want to send this money? Is this the right? All this sort of stuff. Because of that, when you say yes and you press the button and send the money, that's then on you, because they've done their part to ask the question, are you sure? And you said yes. So really be sure it's the right account details.
After you said, for goodness sake, yes, I am sure, for the 5th time, or however many times we get made to say, yeah, absolutely. So the IBAN there. And yes, sending small test payments as well is a great idea, isn't it?
Well, if you're sending large amounts, I always think that, you know, there's nothing to lose to send a small amount as a test, just to make, especially if you've not paid them before. You'd rather lose $100 than $100,000. So maybe just do a small test just to make sure.
Yeah,
but again,
very good.
You know, this takes time. You've got to ring the beneficiary. You want to maybe do a small test. So again, you know, if you have got payment deadlines, maybe just factor that in, because I definitely think that's worth doing.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And we'll come back to the banks and why people might want to think twice about getting the bank to change money for them, even though they say it's free, etc. Good evening to you, José Cruz. Boa noite, José Cruz in Santa Cruz, and happy to report officially passed the Portuguese A2 level exam. Congratulations. Great work and already enrolled on B1, B2. Excellent model student there. Fantastic. And people are asking you questions, as you say, about where you're doing that. But congratulations. That's wonderful. Hola, boa tarde from Phyllis in South Florida. Great to have you here, Phyllis. And yeah, pressing the button then with the IBAN, that moment when you just like, you think, what's happening now? It's in the air. The money, the money has gone into the ether. And I don't know if this is, we can roll this question in from Alex about this. Are the money you're holding, is the money you're holding on my currency account in any way protected as a FDIC insurance in the US? Okay, so there's two parts to it then, aren't there? There's what's happening to the money when it leaves after you've pressed the button and where it's going to end up. How safe is it just digitally and in the ether? And yes, the insurances and the backup that you've got when you're holding money. Sarah, if you could address that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as a company, we have all the licenses in place where we need to. So specifically, so obviously in the UK, we've got FCA authorized and regulated. In America, it's with FinCEN. We've got money transmitter licenses for all of the states. So there's certain things that you have to have in place anyway as a company. But also, as you're right, sort of sending that money, going into the ether can be very daunting. Where's it at? So we do actually have extra tracking on the payment, so we know exactly where it is, and we can provide that information when it's actually in the beneficiary as well. Sometimes that's useful because it could be good for the audit trail. If you're buying a property, we can send it on to you, and you can send it on to your estate agent or buyer's agent, or whoever you're dealing with. Sometimes it may be a case of just sort of, if you're, we had a client who was buying off a builder and they needed to get the money there ASAP. We could show them it was on its way. We could show him when it's hit his account, just to give that peace of mind that he's getting his money. But also, what I've noticed listening to some of the webinars on Expats Portugal around buying property, where it's slightly different. Sometimes in Portugal, it seems that rather than just paying to the lawyer, that you can actually pay direct to the seller. So again, that adds an extra element of, we know when it's in that seller's account. So if they're saying to you they've not received it, we can show you that they have. So that's
good.
maybe an extra level there if you're kind of unsure to be sending it direct to the seller, rather than obviously going into a lawyer's escrow account and then on for that extra sort of protection there.
And this happens all on your back office, right? The people can see this for themselves as a user of your software.
With the tracking, you can log in and see details of your account very similar to you would with your normal bank.
Yeah.
But the extra tracking will not be seen there, but we can provide the information and we can let you know when the money's in the account, and we can send that information over to you by email.
And by that time, as we've discovered with many of our community members here at Expats Portugal, you're on first name terms with somebody at the Spartan FX office, and you can just ring up and say, Neil, can you just help me out with something? And that, I mean, that's a level of connection we're talking about here, isn't it? You know, there is that technological back office that people are familiar with, but what people might not be familiar with is the personal service that you offer, because that's becoming less and less possible, I think, in the world of money, isn't it? So very reassuring to know that. And I'm sure many people here in the Expats Portugal community will speak fondly of your team. And that's why you get those 5-star awards, of course, a platinum service award from FIFO there. That's great.
Absolutely. I mean, the other side to it is that obviously, you know, there are a lot of elements that are automated and things can move very quickly, but there are bank cut-off times. And what we've seen is that if we know, again, there is sometimes benefit to human intervention, is that if we know that you've got to make a payment, and they say it's a Friday and there's a cut-off time, banking cut-off time, we can actually sort of override the system and make sure that your payment gets sent out so that you can meet the deadlines that you need to make. Whereas for some companies, where it's all a sort of automated big system, if you're sort of in a line of a queue, and if you've missed the cut-off banking time, then it won't get sent till the next day. So it's things like that. We know if people have deadlines, we can make sure that we try and prioritize payments as well, and get it there as quickly as possible. When the money's with us, you talked about obviously security and about the protection on the money. Yeah, similar to the UK, usually a lot of accounts are protected. I think it's up to about £85,000. The difference with the way that our accounts are set up, all the money's protected. It's not an pooled account. Not all of our clients' money are in one big pooled account. You have your individual account in your name, and that account is protected. So anything should happen to us as a company, all your money gets returned first. So all the money is protected.
There you go. That's good to know. Fantastic. All right. Banks. Why people might think twice when the bank says you can just do it through us. It's not a problem, and it's free. Actually, it's free as well. And this especially proves the old saying, doesn't it? There's no such thing as a free lunch or probably a free FX transfer either. Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have any transfer fees, but obviously we're not a charity. We do make money, but we make it very transparent, and we make it through the spread between what we buy and what we sell at. But again, it's similar to the bank. They say they'll do it for free. It's not for free. There may be a free transfer fee, but it will still be the exchange rate. That's where they're making their money, and that's where you'll see the difference of what the money, turns up in your Portuguese bank account compared to what you bought. And that's the other thing as well, is that because of the way that the banks work, is that if I go in and I get a quote from my bank, they can't honour that price there and then. It's actually when the money's sent. So say, for example, you say, right, okay, I'll go ahead and do that. Now, if the money's sent later today and the rate's moved, it will be at the rate when the money's transferred. Or again, if you've missed the bank cut-off time, it will go the next day again at the rate it is at the day. So the challenge with that is obviously depending on, as you use the term volatility, how much volatility we've got going on at the moment, then can dictate whether you gain more or less on that transfer. If you get more, that's fantastic, more in your Portuguese bank account. If you get more and you're sending it to the lawyer, they're getting more money. If it's less, that's where there's a little problem, because especially if you need to pay someone a certain amount of money and the money's short, you'll then need to make another payment. So again, it's more hassle and maybe cost you more. So that's the only challenge with the bank, is that they can't secure the rate for you when you speak to them. It is when the money's actually sent.
And am I right in thinking it's not their main business? I mean, it's obviously the name suggests it's your main business, Spartan FX, foreign exchange, as it should be. For banks, it's not their main business. They do it for people, don't they? And less, I think they want to deviate from their core business, but it's not what they want to do. And sometimes you get penalized. Sometimes it's not free, right? And Mrs. M here paid a £90, 90 sterling fee for a consultation in the UK. And I think she was charged €30 or something to pay a 90. She didn't think about it. Yeah, this is what we're talking about, isn't it? People don't think about what they're doing necessarily here, especially if they haven't done it before. And she got paid. She had to pay this massive amount just to have that processed by the bank, because they don't really want to be doing that sort of work, I don't think, do they?
No, but that's the thing, because you then have a deadline, you have no choice.
Yes.
And that's with a lot of, obviously, a lot of our lives. When you leave something to last minute, with anything, you have to pay a little bit more. Oh, I wish I'd thought about that.
Yes,
but
right.
you have to pay it, or whatever that is, because you need to do whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah.
So again, it's just sort of thinking about it a little bit sooner. I think generally, no. I mean, if I take the UK as example, I've had friends that have worked in the bank, and it isn't their main core business.
Yeah.
They make more money from everything else, really, loans and things like that.
Selling you things. Yeah, selling you things rather than
Exactly.
processing things for you.
I mean, I always remember I rang, it's happened a couple of times now in the past, I've rang my bank just to see what quote they'd offer me, and they finally put me through to a department, which I assumed was the department that dealt with this, but the woman kept referring to the exchange rate as the interest rate the whole time.
Oh, really? Not her daily
No,
thing then, by the sound of it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really good to know. So, yeah, I mean, think again, definitely, if you're going to let your bank take care of it. I mean, by all means, find out what they've got to offer, and then have a chat with your Spartan FX person to see how it compares. And talking of comparisons, Diana B says here, thanks for this, Diana. Based on my experience, I save anywhere from 300 to 500 basis points exchanging US dollars to euros with Spartan FX. Now, I don't know what that means, but it sounds really great. Can you explain what that means from Diana there? Thank you for that.
She's talking about the rate rather than actual pounds or US dollars saving.
Okay, right.
We're sort of talking about.
Yeah.
Again, depending on how much you're transferring, that will then dictate what the saving is then in US dollars or sterling, if that makes sense. So
Very
just to
good.
give an
Okay.
example of the rate savings.
I'm just easily impressed by hundreds and lots of zeros. Thank you for that, Diana. Does Spartan FX send money to the landlord for the rent, or does the rent get paid through the Portuguese bank account? Thea is asking.
Either. As long as there's an IBAN number, we can pay to it. As we joked, if the poor man takes it, the IBAN, but I'm sure he probably wants cash, we can pay.
Not that we recommend that.
No.
Okay, so either way, Thea, you'll get a chance to ask questions. If anyone, including you, has a question of a more sort of personal nature, we can ask those after the recording. Might be a good idea to conclude them, Sarah. I know you like to make it simple with, you see, what I'm hoping for here is 3 Ps: price, process, and exchange rate movements, which kind of spoils it. If we can think of a P that covers exchange rate movements, that would be awesome. The 3 Ps of currency exchange with Spartan FX. But could you just quickly go through those then? I mean, it is price, exchange rate movements, and process as a nice way of kind of resolving things tonight before we go to those personal questions.
Yeah, so we've kind of touched on it throughout, but again, to simplify things, that's how I kind of break it down. Price is really sort of what you're paying. So in comparison to your bank, as you said, rightly said, Carl, do price around. I mean, you know, we've seen client Bank of America charged them about 5 or 6%. You know, some banks are slightly better. Charles Schwab are a little bit cheaper. Overall, obviously, we're better than the banks, but again, do price around. And even against other providers as well. So that's the first thing. And while that's still important, I would say the other two have much bigger impact. You know, the exchange rate movement, you know, price on the day, say you're pricing us against a competitor or your bank, you know, depending on how much you're transferring, you know, 3 or 4%, few thousand, maybe less, maybe it's a couple of hundred, maybe it's smaller than that. But an exchange rate movement, as we touched on, that movement can be far greater. That can cost you a lot more than actually just what you're offering, your bank's offering. And that's the second point, is really looking at this in advance, because there are options. And whether it be buying your euros in advance, whether it be small amount, half of it, quarter of it, sort of spread it along. You've got a deadline to make where you're buying a property. Maybe we can look at fixing the rate for that future payment. What's quite good about that is that to fix a rate, we only need 10% of the amount that you need to fix. It's not a cost or a charge. It fixes the rate, and then you pay the remaining 90% when you need the money, and all the money goes out, but it's the rate you pre-agreed with us. The benefit then is that maybe, for example, you've got your money in a higher interest earning account, say in America, you might want to keep it there. That allows you to maybe do that. So again, there are a number of options, worthwhile just having those conversations. And again, the process, that's really the biggest thing that I see most of the team speaking to customers about, is either someone's coming to us because they've left it to the last minute and they've encountered problems and they're super stressed, or we're speaking to them in advance, which is great. We're finding out who they're banking with. If they bank with, say, a couple of banks, which is the best one. If they're banking with one bank that's not as great, then we can give them guidance on opening a bank account with another bank in America, moving their money. And, you know, there's things that we can do in ways around it that involves, because we have unfortunately seen clients have to fly back in order to resolve these sort of issues, which you just really wouldn't want to have to do.
How resentful would you be if you had to go to all of that trouble just to fly back to, I mean, I can imagine the look and atmosphere on people's faces if they've had to fly back just to speak to their bank to do a process with their own money. That must be very infuriating and extremely costly.
Well, it was, because one client, they had to fly back. So obviously the cost of the flight, then also the exchange rate moved as well. So even more money. So, you know, this can happen. But ultimately, then again, it's that delay of my bank's holding up my money, or an online provider's holding my money for 2 weeks and I can't make that payment. Fortunately, you know, for a client, they had extra money. If you don't, and you miss that payment, do you miss out on that property? Do you miss out on that car? You know, that sort of thing. Or have I not rang the beneficiary? The email's been intercepted and all of a sudden my money's gone to somebody else and I'm struggling to get it back. And it's things like that, that not to scare people, but it's again just getting you thinking about this that you might not have already thought about.
Yeah, awareness, isn't it, really? So you've dealt with price. This is great. You're breaking it down to 3 areas: price, exchange rate movements, and then finally process. And the first part of the process, of course, begins with talking to Spartan FX and opening up a free account, which all Expat Portugal members can do. Get in touch with you and start that process and start what turns out to be quite a close relationship with people. And I think people feel like they have a friend right over there in the UK, of course, which is where you're based. And we hear of Ben and Neil and Steve helping people out on first name terms.
Absolutely. I mean, if I use myself as an example, I'm obviously more than capable of making my own transfers, but moving is stressful. There was so much to do. So, you know, I was trying to apply for my visa, I was moving house, then I was moving abroad. And so Steve is my dealer. I ring up Steve, I tell him I need to make this transfer. I pay the money in and the money goes. It's there.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's easy. I can do it myself. I'm more than capable. So as I said, it's not to say that you're not capable of doing it yourself, but sometimes it is just that element of there's so much more going on. It'd make it easy that someone else does it for you.
Very good. Right, we'll go to your question, Janine, in just a moment after we've concluded the recording. Before we do, Jerry, you speak to a lot of people who I think use Spartan, and you've got third party sort of testimonial input from satisfied customers, I think.
Absolutely, I do, Carl, and I think the points that Sarah and you and indeed you had made yourself are so valid and so important. I do most of our consultations with our members at Expats Portugal every day. I'm talking with new people who are in the process of moving here, and this is the one area that often takes people by surprise. They haven't thought about it, and can catch people out. I have known a situation where a couple had agreed to buy a house in Portugal. They signed a promissory contract to pay the money in euros in 6 months. I've forgotten what the actual amount was, but it was something like 200,000 euros. And that converted to something like $215,000 or something. So they kind of fixed everything on that basis. But then 6 months, and they were able to sell their home in the US and have some spare money left over, and they were going to treat themselves to a new car when they arrived in Portugal. But in 6 months, when the actual transfer took place, the rates of exchange had moved, and their $215,000 was now closer to $230,000, and most of the money for the car had disappeared. The euro rate hadn't changed, the price hadn't changed in euros, it was the exchange rate that changed.
Yeah.
And this is a big area that people don't really stop and think about. I was just thinking, listening to Sarah, that back in the days when I ran sort of corporate businesses, we paid a huge amount of attention to buying forward in foreign currencies and trying to protect ourselves against falls against interest rates, because it was an area where we could actually lose a lot of money. But by paying attention to it, we actually managed to make some money on it occasionally, which was quite nice. But it is an important area for people to consider. It's not normally, it's easy to think about, oh, I need a visa and I need a NIF and I need a bank account, and I need, this, that, and the other. But actually, what about moving money, and not just regular, not just one-off amounts, large amounts when you're buying a property or a car or whatever it might be, but what about the regular amounts that you'll be transferring as well? How do you make sure you get the best of all of that? I've also known situations with people who had difficulty getting their banks in America to issue payments because they weren't in America at the time. And that can be a problem. And I've encountered people who've had difficulties with limits, how much they can transfer at any one time, and also time restraints. I think, Sarah, some banks will say only, so many transfers in a month and things like that. So, we at Expats Portugal, one of the things we say about joining us is to save time, or two things we say: save time and frustration by speaking with us first, and avoid costly mistakes by getting the right advice. And this is one area where we believe this is the right advice, and this is right to consider, and it's easy to dismiss. So that's what I wanted to say.
Jerry. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for that contribution. And basically what we're talking about is getting aware of what you don't know what you don't know. This is a new situation that many people find themselves in, so they can get up to speed, find out what they need to know, and then take action. of course, sooner rather than later, and get their Spartan FX account opened, have a chat with you, Jerry, and with a member of the team over at Spartan FX. So, Sarah, thank you so much. Looking forward to chatting with you informally now about your own move to Portugal and dealing with some of these extra questions that have come in here. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude?
Just quickly, because we didn't touch too much on it, and obviously Jerry raised it there about the sort of smaller amounts. Obviously, we talked a lot about large amounts because rate movements will make more of a difference.
Yeah.
Obviously, on the smaller amounts, there still is a difference there. Again, it's sort of really talking to finding out what's the payment that you need to make. Is it are you getting rental money, or are you getting an income from say the US or the UK to Portugal? Is it a pension transfer, or on the other side you're still in Portugal, the US, and you need to make a mortgage payment? So again, it's whether there's what kind of deadlines there are, or do you need the money every month to live on? Do you have flexibility on, can I keep, save it up for a couple of months and then maybe move the money looking at the exchange rate, or do I need it every month? That makes a bit of a difference, because obviously if you have a bit more flexibility on time, that's obviously where you can sort of watch out a little bit for the rates and take advantage when the rates do move, and obviously store the money up in your account. If you're living off it every month and you need it there, then one of the things we could do, we've talked about it for the property, but we can fix the rate for 12 months. And then you can draw down every month on the amounts that you need. Again, you're then fixing that rate for a full sort of 12 months. Unfortunately, we can't fix it for life, but again, it's just trying to
Wouldn't that be amazing?
But sort of as a total, it's trying to sort of get you as much as we can for you to live on. Or make sure it's you're not short or caught out, as Jerry said. Again,
Yes.
when you're thinking about living, I mean, even myself is sort of, what am I living on? What money have I got to live on? And that changes ultimately with the exchange rate.
Yes, and we'll chat as well, because there've been some big governmental decisions just recently. I think Bank of England were announcing things today, weren't they? So we'll chat about those in just a moment. For the time being, thank you so much. There's always more to it than I realise or remember with exchange. So great to have you here tonight, and thank you very much so far.